In the summer of 1941, the world was at war. Adolf Hitler's ruthless ambition and overwhelming military strength made Nazi Germany seem unstoppable. Hitler was at the peak of his power. He and his allies dominated Europe and North Africa. He'd seized France, the Netherlands, most of Scandinavia and Eastern Europe. And then he launched the biggest invasion force in history, more than 3 million men, at the Soviet Union. He was determined to destroy communism and expand his empire still further. By the spring of 1942, after 9 months of fighting, the Germans had pressed deep into Soviet territory, but failed to secure complete victory. So in April, Hitler drew up a new battle plan. In the far south of the country, there were vast oil reserves, crucial to the Soviet war effort. Hitler wanted to stop the oil getting to Soviet troops and industry, first by preventing oil tankers transporting it up the river Volga, and then by seizing the oil fields themselves. Oil was the key to the war. Hitler knew Stalin would fight tooth and nail to protect his oil. Without it, the Soviet war machine would grind to a halt. In May 1942, Hitler put his plan into action. He sent 2 million men, nearly 2/3 of all his troops in the Soviet Union, through the Russian steppe towards the oil fields.
With the hot sun beating down on them, the German troops sped across southern Russia. Despite pockets of fierce resistance, they seemed unstoppable. Some of them even felt like heroes, pioneers of a new empire for the German people.
Hitler was so confident and impatient for victory that he decided to alter his plan of attack. Instead of trying first to block the Volga and then take the oil fields, he decided to attack both targets at the same time. One army would drive south to the oil fields, the other would seize a city on the banks of the Volga that would give them a stranglehold on the river's vital supply line. It was the city that bore the name of the Soviet leader himself. Its name was Stalingrad. Stalingrad was one of the most vibrant cities in southern Russia. Huge factories made equipment for the army. And workers could relax by strolling along the grand boulevards and parks leading down to the banks of the river. The city was the showpiece of the Soviet Union and its leader, Stalin. Joseph Stalin was a ruthless dictator. Stalin wasn't his real name, but it meant man of steel and fitted his terrifying reputation. His orders had led to the death of millions of Soviet citizens. He had absolute control over the Soviet war effort and was now increasingly alarmed by the German advance. Faced with a threat to his oil fields and to the city of Stalingrad, Stalin decided to take desperate measures to stiffen Soviet resistance. In July 1942, his order went out. From now on, there would be no step backwards. Surrender or retreat would not be tolerated. Deserters and cowards would be shot.
Throughout Stalingrad, over 750,000 people were told to get ready for war on their doorstep. Anti-aircraft guns were placed on the high ground, and the civilians helped the military in the desperate attempt to prepare the city's defences. Women and children helped dig anti-tank trenches and built bomb shelters under the city streets. Soviet soldiers began to surround the city, and brutal anti-German propaganda filled the newspapers. One very famous piece of Soviet propaganda was published in the form of a poem. It urged Soviet troops to kill Germans. It said, "Kill him, so tears should flow in his home, not in yours. Kill him, every time you see him." The tone was being set for one of the most savage battles in modern history.
Although his city lay in ruins, Stalin had won. But victory had come at a terrible price. The Soviets lost more men and women during the Stalingrad campaign than Britain and America lost during the entire war. This park is a monument to the defenders of Stalingrad, who ultimately helped change the course of the Second World War. Stalingrad was the battle that marked the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. Over the next 2 years, Stalin chased Hitler's armies all the way back to Berlin. In 1945, the Nazi Empire was finally crushed between Britain, America, and their allies in the West, and Soviet forces in the East. The irony is that Stalin went on to replace one oppressive empire in Eastern Europe with another of his own. And the Soviet Union, which had been the West's ally during the Second World War, became its bitter opponent during the Cold War, which lasted another half-century.